Why does that person occupy your thoughts? A Buddhist reflection on mental liberation. Have you ever found yourself trapped in a mental cycle, unable to escape the relentless intrusion of someone's image, their words, their very presence in your mind? It's a haunting, isn't it? You might wake up in the middle of the night with their face staring back at you, or feel the sting of their absence in the most unexpected moments, when you least want to remember them. Perhaps it's that former lover whose memory still lingers like a ghost, or that colleague whose toxic words echo in your mind long after you've clocked out. Or maybe it's a family member whose actions from years ago continue to shadow your every thought. This mental torment is not just a fleeting annoyance. It feels like an invisible weight, dragging at you, keeping you from moving forward. The incessant thoughts, the unresolved emotions, they pull at the fabric of your mental and emotional well-being, making it harder and harder to find peace. But here's the thing. This isn't just a coincidence, nor is it a sign of weakness. It's a universal experience deeply rooted in human psychology, and more profoundly, it's an experience addressed by ancient wisdom. Zen Buddhism, with its centuries-old teachings, provides an answer, a reflection on why certain individuals occupy our thoughts, and how we can liberate ourselves from their grasp. In today's world, where we are constantly bombarded with information and fleeting distractions, it's easy to overlook the profound effects of these persistent thoughts. Yet, Zen Buddhism offers a transformative lens through which we can not only understand why someone's memory holds such sway over us, but also how we can begin to release that grip. The answer lies not in trying to erase them from your mind, but in understanding why they remain and using that understanding as a pathway to mental liberation. It's time to stop seeing these thoughts as an affliction and start seeing them as an opportunity for healing, growth, and ultimately, freedom. Stay with me as we explore the deep wisdom of Zen Buddhism, offering insights that will transform your relationship with these persistent thoughts and lead you to the peace you seek. Chapter 1. The distinction between love and attachment. In the quiet depths of Zen Buddhism, there exists a profound distinction between love and attachment, one that offers us a way to untangle the knots of our emotional suffering. While love is a vast, peaceful force that connects us to others in freedom, attachment is a silent, insidious force that binds us in chains. It's crucial, then, to understand this difference when it feels like someone is occupying your mind, especially when it's not just their memory that lingers, but the anxiety and longing they leave behind. We often confuse attachment with love. We might believe that our overwhelming thoughts, our intense emotions towards someone, are proof of deep love. After all, when we love, don't we feel everything more intensely? But Zen teachings invite us to ask, is it truly love that you feel, or is it attachment disguised as love? True love, as taught by the Buddha, is gentle and liberating. It is expansive like the sky, filled with peace and goodwill. It allows the other to exist as they are, free from the grasping hand of control or desire. Attachment, on the other hand, is born from fear and need. It arises from the belief that our happiness depends on the presence of another. Attachment thrives in the spaces where insecurity, fear of loss, and the need for validation dwell. It feels heavy, almost suffocating. When someone occupies your thoughts, and instead of peace, you feel unease, fear, or a longing for something you can't have, that is not love. It's attachment, like a storm that swirls around you, distorting your vision and clouding your mind. Buddhism teaches us that attachment is the root of suffering. When we become attached to someone, we are not loving them from a place of openness and understanding. Instead, we are clinging to an ideal, a version of them that we need to be a certain way in order to fulfill our desires. This desire is often unconscious, hidden beneath the surface, and it causes mental turbulence. The Buddha spoke of attachment with striking clarity, describing it as holding a burning coal, intending to throw it at someone else, but ultimately being the one who gets burned. Imagine this for a moment. You hold this coal tightly, with the intent to throw it in anger or frustration, believing that releasing it will bring you relief. But in the end, the heat of it only harms you. The pain and suffering caused by attachment are much the same. When we cling to someone's memory, to the idea of them, or to the way they once made us feel, we suffer. The person, in essence, remains unchanged, while we carry the weight of that unresolved attachment. But here is the turning point. Zen teaches us that liberation doesn't come from forcing ourselves to stop thinking about someone or suppressing these feelings. Liberation comes when we change our relationship with these thoughts and emotions. The practice of loving kindness, or metta, offers a powerful antidote to attachment. Metta is not about clinging, controlling, or expecting anything in return. It is about wishing the other person well, regardless of their place in your life. It is about sending them goodwill, compassion, and peace, not because you need them to feel a certain way, but because you, too, are worthy of peace. Metta allows you to release the need to possess, control, or demand something from the other person. When you wish them happiness without expectation, you free both yourself and them. You create space for genuine love to flow, a love that is not rooted in fear or need, but in freedom and compassion. It is this freedom that allows you to look at the person not as someone who needs to fill a void within you, but as a fellow being on their own journey. This shift is subtle, but it can make all the difference. By releasing attachment, we find peace not only with the other person, but also within ourselves. We begin to see that love does not have to be confined by our personal desires or expectations. Instead, it can be expansive, unconditional, and completely liberating. So the next time a person occupies your thoughts and stirs up feelings of discomfort or longing, pause and observe. Ask yourself, is this love or is it attachment? And if it is attachment, gently return to the practice of loving kindness. Wish them well, and in doing so, you will discover that the weight of their memory lightens, the turbulence within you calms, and you are no longer bound by the grasp of unfulfilled desires. In this space of liberation, you may just find that the person who once dominated your thoughts is no longer a source of pain, but a reflection of your own growth. And that is the true power of love, the ability to set both yourself and others free. Chapter 2: The Karmic Connection. In the teachings of Buddhism, there is a profound understanding that nothing happens by accident. Every person we meet, every interaction we experience, serves a specific purpose, one that is often linked to our deeper spiritual evolution. Our relationships, whether joyful or painful, are not random. They are karmic connections, designed to offer us lessons that we need for our growth and healing. When someone persists in your thoughts, lingering long after the event or interaction has passed, there is usually an unresolved karmic bond at play. The thoughts don't simply come from nowhere. They are not just random, fleeting distractions. Instead, they are signals from the deeper, more subtle parts of the mind, pointing towards something that needs to be acknowledged, processed, or released. Buddhist philosophy teaches that karma isn't about punishment or reward. It's about completion. It's about understanding that our actions, words, and intentions create ripples that shape our lives and the lives of others. And when something or someone remains in your mind, there's often a lesson you haven't fully learned. Perhaps this person has hurt you in some way, and that pain has never been fully felt, recognized, or processed. That wound remains, like an open cut that, despite time passing, never truly heals because you haven't given it the attention it requires. On the other hand, perhaps you have hurt this person, and the guilt, regret, or unspoken apology lingers like a shadow that follows you wherever you go. Zen teachings invite us to pause and reflect. What lesson remains unlearned? This question is not about blaming the person for their actions or rehashing old grievances. Rather, it's about recognizing that the persistent thoughts, those people who seem to haunt your mind, are offering you an opportunity. These thoughts are not the problem. They are the solution waiting to unfold. The problem isn't the presence of the person in your mind, but your relationship to the emotions that arise when you think about them. These persistent thoughts are shining a light on the unfinished business that you still carry. The first step in breaking free from this karmic cycle is to approach these thoughts not with resistance or judgment, but with an open heart. Instead of pushing them away or wishing that they would go away, take a moment to lean into the discomfort. Ask yourself, what is it that I still need to learn from this situation? Is there a truth I am avoiding? Is there forgiveness I still need to offer either to the person or to myself? What am I still holding on to that keeps this emotional attachment alive? In the vastness of Zen wisdom, there is a beautiful analogy that can help us understand the nature of karmic connections. Each person we meet is a mirror, reflecting back parts of ourselves we have yet to see. This is a powerful and humbling perspective. The people who cause us the most pain, or the ones we can't seem to forget, are often holding up a mirror to us, reflecting something within ourselves that we've yet to acknowledge. It could be a wound that needs healing, a belief that needs changing, or a truth that needs acceptance. Imagine that the person who hurts you, whether intentionally or unintentionally, has offered you a gift. It might not look like a gift at first. It might be wrapped in pain, in anger, or in regret, but it's a gift nonetheless. They have offered you the opportunity to confront something within yourself that you've been avoiding. The emotional entanglement you feel is not theirs to resolve. It is yours. And once you recognize this, you are empowered to free yourself from the karmic chain that binds you to them. The Buddha taught that true spiritual liberation comes when we stop viewing our relationships as sources of happiness or suffering, but as tools for awakening. When we begin to see others not as sources of torment or joy, but as mirrors reflecting the parts of us that still need healing, we shift our perspective. This is where true freedom lies. You no longer need to hold on to anger, guilt, or resentment because you recognize that this person's presence in your life is a karmic blessing, helping you see yourself more clearly. In the Zen tradition, the practice of self-inquiry is essential. When the thoughts of this person overwhelm you, use the moment as an opportunity for introspection. Ask yourself, what do I need to heal? What lesson am I avoiding? This practice, when done with compassion and humility, can break the cycle of repetitive mental suffering. It is not about blaming or vilifying the person in your thoughts, but about asking, what is this person trying to teach me? The answer may come in the form of forgiveness, self-acceptance, or simply the realization that the pain was never about the other person, but about your own unhealed wounds. To embrace the karmic connection fully, you must first forgive yourself for holding onto the emotional weight. Karma isn't about punishment, it's about completion, resolution, and understanding. When we forgive ourselves for not having fully processed a situation or emotion, we give ourselves permission to move forward. This act of forgiveness isn't about excusing the other person's actions. It's about releasing the hold that their actions have over your heart and mind. Finally, Peace comes when we understand that each connection, every interaction, is an opportunity for spiritual growth. The people who occupy your thoughts are not accidents. They are invitations. Invitations to heal, to grow, and to expand your consciousness. In the grand web of life, no one we encounter is without purpose. Even in their silence, their actions, their absence, or their presence, these relationships are perfect in their imperfection, pointing us towards our own spiritual evolution. So the next time someone occupies your mind, rather than feeling frustration or resentment, ask yourself, what is the lesson here? What part of me still needs to be healed? And through that inquiry, you will find that the persistent thoughts, once a source of suffering, become your greatest spiritual teachers, guiding you towards greater peace and deeper understanding. Chapter 3: Projection and the Shadow Self. One of the most profound teachings of both Zen Buddhism and Jungian psychology is the recognition of the shadow self, the aspects of ourselves that we suppress, deny, or simply fail to acknowledge. These are the parts of us that we find uncomfortable, disowning them because they don't fit the image of who we want to be or who we think we should be. But Zen and Jung both teach us that the shadow doesn't simply disappear because we avoid it. In fact, it often manifests in the people around us, especially those who evoke intense reactions within us. When someone dominates your thoughts, particularly when their presence seems to trigger deep emotional responses, it is likely that you are seeing a reflection of your own shadow self. The person who bothers you, who invades your thoughts day and night, might be mirroring a part of you that you've denied or suppressed. It's an unsettling truth, but one that is central to our spiritual growth. These individuals are not just annoying or problematic figures in our lives. They are, in many ways, mirrors. They reflect back to us the very qualities we are trying to hide from ourselves. For example, if a person's confidence irritates or frustrates you, it's possible that you are projecting your own unexpressed confidence onto them. Perhaps you have a deep well of untapped potential, a boldness that you have kept buried because you were taught to be humble, or maybe you fear the vulnerability that comes with being truly seen. Instead of acknowledging this potential within yourself, you see it in others and it triggers a reaction. You may even think, why are they so full of themselves? When, in truth, it's the very self-assuredness that you long to express but haven't yet allowed yourself to. On the other hand, if you find yourself fixated on someone's flaws, their arrogance, selfishness, or pettiness, it's possible that you are seeing aspects of yourself that you have not yet come to terms with. Zen Buddhism teaches us that when we judge others harshly, it is often a reflection of our own inner judgments. These qualities in others are not just qualities they possess. They are projections of the qualities we hold within ourselves, buried deep in our unconscious mind. Perhaps you too have moments of selfishness or arrogance, but you are unwilling to admit them. Perhaps you deny these aspects of your personality, shoving them deep into the shadow of your psyche, hoping they will stay hidden. But like all things repressed, these qualities find their way into your thoughts, often triggered by those who act in ways you find intolerable. This is where Zen invites us to practice self-inquiry, to sit with these feelings of discomfort, and to ask ourselves the deeper questions. What is it about this person that triggers me the most? What do I find so difficult to accept in them? This simple question can unlock powerful insights into who we truly are beneath the surface. It's an act of spiritual courage, the willingness to look inward and face the parts of ourselves we've been avoiding. It's uncomfortable, but it is the only way to truly integrate the shadow and move toward wholeness. For example, if you are irritated by a friend's brashness, ask yourself, What part of me is this mirroring? Maybe, just maybe, you have been silent for too long, afraid to speak your truth. Or perhaps you have always been taught that humility means swallowing your opinions. What if this person's brashness is merely a projection of your own repressed desires? The desire to express yourself boldly, unapologetically, and confidently. The discomfort you feel is not an attack on you. It is an invitation to recognize and reclaim that part of yourself. Zen Buddhism teaches us that each person we encounter serves as a mirror, reflecting back parts of ourselves that we have yet to accept. This is not about vilifying the other person. It is about understanding that the qualities we judge, the qualities we project onto others, are part of us too. If we can learn to recognize the patterns of projection, we can begin to reclaim these disowned aspects of ourselves. Rather than being consumed by judgment or resentment, we can approach these situations with compassion and understanding. We can ask, what is this reflection trying to teach me about myself? This process of introspection is not about blaming yourself or feeling shame about these parts of your personality. It is about acknowledging them and accepting them. The shadow self is not our enemy. In fact, it is an essential part of who we are. Without it, we would not be complete. But it is only when we acknowledge our shadow that we can transform it. When we integrate these parts into our conscious awareness, we free ourselves from their unconscious control. The more we practice self-inquiry, the more we realize that what triggers us in others is often a reflection of what needs to be healed within us. This realization allows us to let go of judgment and approach others, and ourselves, with greater compassion. It frees us from the cycle of projecting our inner turmoil onto those around us, enabling us to experience deeper, more authentic relationships. The path of Zen, like the path of self-awareness, teaches us to embrace all aspects of our being, both the light and the shadow, with equal love and acceptance. In doing so, we no longer need to fear or reject those parts of ourselves. We can face them with kindness and gentleness, allowing them to be integrated into our full self-expression. And as we do, the hold that others once had on our thoughts begins to fade. No longer will we be obsessed with the flaws or strengths of others, for we will have come to understand that these qualities are not foreign to us. They are simply aspects of our own consciousness waiting to be seen, accepted, and loved. Ultimately, the journey of integration, of embracing both our light and our shadow, is what leads us toward freedom. The people who trigger us, the ones we can't seem to stop thinking about, are not obstacles to our peace. They are catalysts guiding us toward deeper self-awareness and spiritual growth. By recognizing the projections and accepting the lessons they offer, we are free to step into the fullness of who we are, unapologetically and without fear. This is the ultimate freedom that Zen Buddhism offers. The freedom to be whole, to be complete, and to live in harmony with every aspect of ourselves. Chapter 4: Clinging to Outcomes. In the teachings of Zen Buddhism, suffering is often seen not as something inherent to life, but as a result of our attachments, especially our attachment to specific outcomes. This is one of the core lessons Zen offers us, and it speaks directly to the mental and emotional turmoil that arises when we fixate on how we believe things should be. It's an understanding that can dramatically shift the way we approach life, relationships, and our inner peace. When your thoughts about a person are dominated by a desire for reconciliation, revenge, or reunion, you are not merely caught in an emotional response. You are caught in a deeper, more subtle trap, the trap of attachment to a particular outcome. You have an image in your mind of how things should unfold, and your thoughts are endlessly looping around this vision, refusing to let go. The person might have hurt you, or perhaps there's unresolved tension and you long for resolution. You believe that if things could only go this way, if you could have the apology, the closure, the reunion, then you would be free of the mental anguish. But Zen Buddhism teaches us that this clinging to outcomes is the very thing that prolongs our suffering. The root of this suffering lies in our attachment to control, the need to manipulate how things should unfold, according to our desires. We impose our expectations onto the present moment, and in doing so, we resist the flow of life as it actually is. We become trapped in a cycle of wanting, expecting, and striving, all the while missing the richness of the present moment. Our thoughts about that person, rather than being simple reflections of our feelings, become a tangled web of expectations, and we keep coming back to them, hoping that the outcome will change, that things will align with our wishes. Zen teaches us to embrace what is called the beginner's mind, a mental state that is open, curious, and free from assumptions. It's the mindset of a child who approaches the world with wonder, not burdened by preconceptions of what should be, but instead embracing the present for what it is. In this state, there are no fixed ideas about how things are supposed to turn out. There is only a sense of openness to the unfolding of life as it comes, without the need to control it. This is the essence of freedom. Freedom from the pressure of needing things to be a certain way. Freedom from the suffering caused by attachment to outcomes. When we are fixated on a specific outcome, we close ourselves off to the beauty of the present moment. Our minds become cluttered, our emotions tangled, and the thoughts about that person continue to loop endlessly, because we are not allowing ourselves to accept reality as it is. The more we fixate, the more tightly we grasp onto our expectations, and the more we suffer. But when we release this need for control, when we allow ourselves to accept the present moment as it is, without judgment, we unlock the freedom to let go. This does not mean that we resign ourselves to passivity or indifference. On the contrary, Zen encourages us to be fully engaged in the present moment, but in a way that is grounded in acceptance, not attachment. Acceptance is not about passivity. It is about understanding and allowing things to unfold naturally without imposing our will onto them. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in the middle of a river. The current is flowing steadily around you. If you try to fight the current, if you try to force the water to flow in a direction of your choosing, you will quickly find yourself exhausted, pulled under by the strength of the current. But if you relax, if you allow yourself to move with the current, you will glide through the water with ease. This is the power of acceptance in Zen. It's about letting go of the need to fight against what is, and instead moving in harmony with the natural flow of life. The solution is simple but profound: to release attachment to outcomes. When you stop trying to control the future, when you stop insisting that things go a certain way, you open up space for true freedom. In this freedom, you can fully engage with the present moment. And in doing so, you liberate yourself from the cycle of unfulfilled desires and endless mental looping. You begin to see that life does not have to unfold according to your will for you to find peace. Life, in all its unpredictability and imperfection, is enough just as it is. This shift in mindset may seem subtle, but it is transformative. When we relinquish the need to control outcomes, we free ourselves from the tyranny of expectations. We no longer define our happiness by how others respond to us or by how situations unfold. Instead, we find peace in acceptance, in the understanding that life is fluid, and that our peace of mind does not depend on the people, places, or circumstances around us. Zen Buddhism calls us to a deeper practice of letting go. letting go of our attachments to specific outcomes, letting go of our need to control, and letting go of the belief that our happiness is tied to an external reality. In doing so, we find that the natural flow of life carries us exactly where we need to be. We find peace, not in achieving a specific outcome, but in accepting what is, fully and without resistance. And in this acceptance, we discover the freedom to live in harmony with the world around us. A world that, in its imperfection, is exactly as it is meant to be. The more we practice releasing our attachment to outcomes, the more we understand that the only true control we have is over our own reactions, our own mind. And when we let go of the need for everything to unfold according to our plans, we are free to experience the beauty, joy, and peace that comes from living fully in the present moment, without the burden of expectations. Chapter 5. Identifying with Thoughts. In the quiet teachings of Buddhism, we are reminded of a fundamental truth. We are not our thoughts. Thoughts, much like clouds drifting across the sky, are impermanent and fleeting. They come and go, sometimes quickly, sometimes lingering for a while, but always moving through our minds like weather patterns shifting with the wind. However, the problem arises when we begin to cling to these thoughts, particularly when they involve someone else. We begin to identify with them as though they are a reflection of who we are. But in reality, these thoughts are just transient phenomena, passing through our awareness without any intrinsic connection to our true selves. When a thought about another person enters our mind, it may stir something deep within us. Perhaps it triggers anger, longing, or frustration. We may identify with this thought, believing that it defines us or that it is a permanent part of our emotional landscape. Over time, these thoughts begin to take on a life of their own. They grow stronger, more powerful, and more insistent. This is where the cycle begins. As we identify with the thought, whether it's an unresolved conflict with a loved one or a lingering sense of injustice, we attach ourselves to it. And as we attach, the thought becomes more real and more significant in our minds. But Zen Buddhism teaches us that we don't have to be imprisoned by our thoughts. We can observe them without becoming entangled in them. Zen meditation offers a practice of simply watching thoughts arise, acknowledging them but not claiming ownership of them. When a thought about this person arises, rather than allowing it to define you or your emotional state, you can practice simply noticing it, like a passing cloud without judgment or attachment. This act of observation without identification is a subtle yet profound shift in how we relate to our minds. By learning to observe thoughts from a place of detachment, we create space between ourselves and the thought. Instead of becoming wrapped up in the narrative that the thought creates, whether it's a story of hurt, resentment, or longing, we begin to see it for what it truly is, a temporary mental event. The thought may be strong, it may pull at us, but it is not who we are. It does not define us. It is not our essence. This process of disidentifying with our thoughts creates freedom. It is like standing on the shore, watching the waves crash against the rocks, instead of being pulled into the water and swept away. We can acknowledge the waves, feel the tide of emotions, but we don't have to let them carry us into the depths of suffering. The key is in the shift from identification to observation. As we become more aware of the transient nature of our thoughts, they begin to lose their grip on us. In practical terms, this means when a thought about that person arises, whether it's a painful memory or an unresolved issue, pause. Instead of diving into the thought, simply observe it. Notice the sensations that come with it, the emotions that arise, but do not allow them to define you. Ask yourself, is this thought truly who I am? Or is it just a passing mental event, like a cloud drifting through the sky? By doing so, you begin to separate yourself from the thought, weakening its power over you. Zen teachings encourage us to practice mindfulness and awareness in every moment. The more we observe our thoughts without becoming entangled in them, the more we begin to realize that we are not controlled by them. Thoughts, like clouds, have no inherent power over us unless we grant it. When we disidentify from our thoughts, we open ourselves up to a deeper state of peace and presence. This practice can be especially transformative when it comes to thoughts about others. When someone occupies your mind, whether they are someone you love, someone you are angry with, or someone you are hurt by, you can choose to observe the thoughts as they arise rather than being overwhelmed by them. You can see them as passing phenomena rather than as permanent truths. By doing so, you break the cycle of identification and attachment, and in that moment, you free yourself from the mental grip they have over you. The more we practice this mindful observation of our thoughts, the more we realize that our thoughts are not fixed realities. They are not who we are. They are simply momentary fluctuations of the mind. Our true nature is not defined by the thoughts that come and go, but by the awareness that watches them. This awareness is constant and unchanging, while thoughts come and go like the waves of the ocean. In Zen Buddhism, this is the path of liberation. To recognize that we are not our thoughts, and that peace comes when we stop identifying with them. When we no longer identify with our thoughts, they lose their power to control us, and we find ourselves living in a deeper state of harmony with the present moment. By observing, rather than identifying, with our thoughts, we reclaim our inner peace, and we open the door to a life of freedom and spiritual growth. Chapter 6: The Illusion of Permanence. One of the most transformative insights Zen Buddhism offers is the understanding that all things are impermanent. This truth, though simple, carries profound power. It applies to everything we experience: emotions, relationships, thoughts, and even our own sense of self. Nothing in life is fixed or permanent, and this includes the thoughts that occupy our minds, especially those that cause us pain. When someone occupies your thoughts, particularly when they've hurt you or when the relationship is strained, it's easy to feel as if this emotional state will never end. The longing for connection, the grief of separation, the anger or resentment, it all feels so real and so intense, as though it's something that will define you forever. But Zen Buddhism teaches us that this is the illusion of permanence. These emotions, these thoughts, they are not permanent. They are transient, much like the clouds that pass through the sky. No matter how heavy or dark the clouds may seem, they always move on, and so too will our thoughts and emotions. This realization, that nothing is permanent, can bring a profound sense of peace. It allows us to let go of the need to control, to hold onto, or to resist the flow of life. Our suffering often comes from the mistaken belief that the way we feel right now will last forever, that the pain we experience today will never subside. But when we understand that all things, including our most intense emotions, are impermanent, we can begin to shift our relationship with them. For example, when we are in the midst of grief, it can feel as if the sadness will swallow us whole and that there is no way out. But Zen teaches us to observe that grief, like all emotions, is not a permanent state. It will ebb and flow, and it too shall pass. The pain that feels so overwhelming today will eventually soften as time works its quiet magic. Acceptance of impermanence allows us to step back from our suffering and see it for what it truly is: a temporary experience in the vastness of our lives. Just as the seasons change, so too will the seasons of our emotions. This understanding doesn't mean we dismiss or suppress our feelings. It means we hold them with compassion and awareness. We don't need to identify with them, nor do we need to act as though they define us. The pain we feel is real, but it is not permanent. The longing for connection, the heartache of loss, these emotions arise and pass in waves, and with each wave we can learn to ride them, to flow with them, rather than trying to hold them back or force them to disappear. When a thought about a person who has hurt us or a relationship that has fallen apart continues to occupy our minds, we often feel trapped. It feels like the situation is stuck, that the mental loop will never end. But Zen reminds us that nothing lasts forever, not even the thoughts that seem to haunt us. Thoughts, like emotions, are constantly changing. They come, they go, they take shape, and then they fade away. This recognition, the impermanence of all things, is the key to freedom. It is the realization that no mental state, no matter how intense, will remain unchanged forever. The thoughts we cling to, the stories we tell ourselves, they will eventually shift. It is the nature of the mind to be in constant flux. What seems so important and overwhelming today may, with time, lose its grip on us. This truth is incredibly liberating. When we recognize that our thoughts are not permanent, we stop giving them the power to control us. We no longer need to be defined by them or trapped in the cycle of rumination. Instead of struggling against the thoughts, we learn to let them pass, like leaves floating down a river, acknowledging their presence but not holding onto them. In doing so, we free ourselves from the mental weight that we carry. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, and much of our attachment is rooted in our inability to accept impermanence. We want things to stay the same. We want to hold onto a moment or a feeling, but in doing so, we only set ourselves up for suffering. The path to peace lies in accepting that everything changes, including our thoughts, emotions, and circumstances. The sooner we can let go of the need to control or cling to something, the sooner we will find inner peace. This doesn't mean that we resign ourselves to passivity or indifference. Rather, it is a deep and compassionate awareness that life is constantly shifting. We can move with it, embrace it, and find joy in the unfolding moment, even as we feel sadness or pain. In this acceptance of impermanence, we begin to live with greater ease and grace, knowing that nothing, whether joy or suffering, is permanent. When we let go of the illusion of permanence, we open ourselves to the flow of life itself. The pain that feels so real in this moment will not last forever. The longing for connection or resolution will eventually ease. What we resist persists, but what we accept with grace flows naturally. So let go of the thought that any feeling or thought is permanent. Embrace the ebb and flow of life, and in doing so, you will experience the freedom that comes with the understanding of impermanence. Let go, breathe, and know that all things, including your thoughts, are passing, just like the clouds in the sky. Chapter 7, Spiritual Assignments. In the profound teachings of Zen Buddhism, we are encouraged to view the relationships in our lives not simply as random events or coincidences, but as spiritual assignments, opportunities for growth and awakening that have been carefully woven into the fabric of our existence. This idea can seem challenging at first, especially when we find ourselves grappling with the thoughts of someone who has caused us pain or discomfort. But Zen invites us to shift our perspective, to recognize that the people who occupy our minds, especially those who seem to provoke us the most, are often there for a very specific reason. They are catalysts for our spiritual development. This understanding doesn't diminish the reality of the hurt we feel, nor does it minimize the challenges we face in relationships. Instead, it offers us a profound shift in how we relate to the other person, and more importantly, how we relate to ourselves. When someone refuses to leave our thoughts, when they continue to linger in our hearts and minds, it is often because they represent a deeper spiritual lesson that we must integrate. It may not be the lesson we would have chosen for ourselves, but it is the one that we need in this moment of our journey. Rather than seeing this person as a source of pain, Zen teaches us to see them as a spiritual teacher, placed in our lives to show us something we may not yet fully understand. It is easy to view individuals who cause us distress or emotional turmoil as obstacles to our peace, as burdens we must bear or problems we must solve. But when we view them through the lens of spiritual awakening, they become the very tools that help us heal. They are the mirrors reflecting back the parts of ourselves that are still in need of growth, whether it be in the areas of forgiveness, compassion, self-awareness, or letting go. For instance, if someone occupies your thoughts because of an unresolved conflict or hurt, instead of focusing on the desire to make them change, ask yourself, what is this person trying to teach me? The persistent thought is not a random intrusion. It is an invitation to look deeper into your own soul. What is the lesson you have yet to learn? What within you is still seeking resolution? Is it forgiveness, either of them or of yourself? Is it letting go of expectations that bind you to this person or to this situation? Is it about recognizing how much of your own identity is tied up in this unresolved feeling? Zen Buddhism emphasizes that life itself is a mirror, and the people we encounter are reflections of our inner world. If someone triggers anger in you, it may be an invitation to explore where in your own life you are holding onto resentment. If someone makes you feel inadequate, perhaps it is time to examine where you are still seeking validation from external sources. The teachings of Zen encourage us to ask not why this person is causing us distress, but what we are being called to learn from them. This perspective shift is liberating because it frees us from the cycle of victimhood and blame. Instead of asking, how can I stop thinking about them? We begin to ask, what can I learn from this persistent thought? What is this person trying to teach me? This change in approach transforms a source of suffering into an opportunity for enlightenment. We no longer see ourselves as powerless in the face of our emotions. We see ourselves as active participants in our own spiritual growth, empowered by the lessons we are meant to learn. Each relationship is a spiritual assignment, and each lesson is an opportunity for awakening. Sometimes these assignments come in the form of difficult, painful experiences, and sometimes they appear as moments of deep joy and connection. But in each, there is the potential for transformation. By shifting our perspective, we free ourselves from the need to control or fix the other person and instead turn our focus inward, toward the growth and healing we are being called to experience. Consider how much suffering is alleviated when we stop viewing others as obstacles or sources of pain. Instead, we see them as spiritual teachers sent to guide us toward greater self-awareness, healing, and understanding. The next time you find yourself consumed by thoughts of someone who has hurt or disappointed you, try to shift your focus from how to stop thinking about them to what they are teaching you. In this simple yet profound shift, you begin to reclaim your power and transform your suffering into an opportunity for deep spiritual growth. In Zen, we are encouraged to see each person as a miracle in disguise, even if that miracle is difficult to recognize at first. They are sent to us not to punish us, but to help us evolve, to awaken us to new layers of ourselves that we may have long ignored. When we embrace this perspective, we begin to live with more acceptance, more peace, and more clarity. We see life not as a series of random events, but as a sacred unfolding, each relationship and experience contributing to our path toward greater wisdom and compassion. This is the heart of spiritual assignments. Understanding that every person, every relationship, and every challenge in our lives has a divine purpose, guiding us toward our highest potential. When we embrace this truth, we no longer fight against our thoughts or our feelings. Instead, we welcome them as part of the greater journey, knowing that they are leading us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Chapter 8, Path to Liberation. In Zen Buddhism, the path to liberation from obsessive thoughts is not a distant goal or a mystical experience, but a practical and accessible journey that we can all embark upon. It is a path of mindfulness, compassion, and acceptance, and it begins with a simple but profound shift in how we relate to our thoughts. One mindful observation. The first step on this path is to observe your thoughts without judgment. Zen teaches us that thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky. They come and go, fleeting and impermanent. The challenge, however, is not in the thoughts themselves, but in how we engage with them. When a thought arises, especially one about someone who dominates your mind, it is easy to become entangled in it. You start weaving stories around it, attaching meanings and emotions to it, and suddenly it has a grip on you. Mindful observation invites us to simply notice the thought when it arises without attaching any judgment. See it for what it is, a mental event, a cloud in the sky of your consciousness. By observing without judgment, we create space between us and the thought, and in that space, we begin to find the peace that lies beneath the surface of our minds. The more we practice this, the more we realize that thoughts, like clouds, are temporary and do not define us. 2. Compassionate inquiry. Once we begin observing our thoughts, the next step is to approach them with compassionate inquiry. This practice involves gently investigating the underlying attachment or lesson behind the thought. When you find yourself repeatedly thinking about someone, ask yourself, what is this thought trying to teach me? Is there an unresolved emotion or belief that I am holding on to? Is there a part of me that is still seeking healing? Zen Buddhism encourages us to approach our thoughts and emotions with kindness and curiosity rather than judgment. We are not here to punish ourselves for having these thoughts, but to understand why they persist. Each thought, each repetitive mental loop is a pointer, an invitation to go deeper into ourselves, to understand the roots of our attachments and unresolved feelings. The more we ask with compassion, the more we begin to uncover the wisdom within. 3. Letting go. As we investigate these thoughts with compassion, we come to the next step, letting go. This is the practice of releasing the emotional charge that these thoughts have over us. Zen teaches that attachment is the root of suffering, and we suffer when we cling to thoughts, desires, or outcomes. Letting go does not mean forcing ourselves to forget or suppress thoughts. Instead, it means allowing them to pass freely without holding onto them or trying to control them. When we accept that thoughts are temporary and that we do not need to hold onto them to define our sense of self, we begin to experience true freedom. Letting go is an act of acceptance, accepting the thought as it is, and then allowing it to fade naturally. Through acceptance, we release the grip these thoughts have over us, and we find ourselves free to live in the present moment without the burden of past or future projections. 4. Redirecting intentionally. Once we've practiced mindful observation and letting go, the next step is to redirect intentionally. This means using the thoughts that arise as a reminder to return to the present moment. Often, when we find ourselves trapped in obsessive thinking, it's because we are lost in a story, a narrative that pulls us away from the here and now. Zen teaches us to use these thoughts as reminders to come back to the present. When a thought about someone arises, whether it's one that causes pain, frustration, or longing. Use it as an opportunity to gently redirect your focus back to the present moment. Take a deep breath, feel your feet on the ground, and anchor yourself in the now. In this way, our thoughts become vehicles for mindfulness, helping us to stay grounded and aware. Over time, the more we redirect, the less control these persistent thoughts have over us. 5. Loving-kindness meditation. Another powerful tool in Zen Buddhism is the practice of loving-kindness meditation, metta. This practice involves sending well wishes, not only to ourselves, but also to others, especially those who occupy our minds. If a person who causes you distress keeps appearing in your thoughts, use this as an opportunity to practice loving-kindness toward them. You can say silently, "May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be at peace." This may feel challenging at first, especially if the person has caused you pain. But Zen teaches that loving kindness is not dependent on how the other person behaves. It is a practice of offering goodwill and compassion without expectation of anything in return. Through this practice, we begin to shift our relationship to the person from one of attachment or resentment to one of compassion and peace. In time, this act of sending loving kindness to those who occupy our thoughts allows us to release the hold they have over us, transforming negative emotions into a source of healing. 6. Embracing impermanence. Finally, Zen invites us to embrace impermanence. This is the recognition that everything, including our thoughts, is temporary. No matter how intense or persistent a thought may feel, it will not last forever. The very nature of life is change, and nothing remains static. Not our thoughts, not our emotions, not even our relationships. By embracing impermanence, we free ourselves from the illusion of permanence that holds us captive. When we recognize that our thoughts, like all things, are temporary, we gain perspective. We see that the painful thoughts, the feelings of longing, or the memories of past relationships will eventually fade, just like the clouds in the sky. In this recognition, we find peace, because we are no longer clinging to the belief that the way we feel right now will last forever. Through these practices, persistent thoughts that once seemed like torment can become a doorway to liberation. By observing, investigating, letting go, redirecting, practicing loving kindness, and embracing impermanence, we transform our relationship with our thoughts. We free ourselves from the mental prisons we've built, and in doing so, we find peace. The Buddhist path to liberation teaches us that we do not need to be controlled by our thoughts. By recognizing the impermanent nature of all things, including our thoughts, we can find freedom from the cycles of obsession and suffering. And in that freedom, we discover that true peace lies not in the absence of thoughts, but in our ability to meet them with mindfulness, compassion, and acceptance. This is the essence of Zen liberation, the peaceful release of attachment, and the freedom to live in harmony with the flow of life. As we've journeyed together through the teachings of Zen Buddhism, we've uncovered profound insights that have the potential to completely transform how we view and interact with our thoughts. From the practice of mindful observation to the release of attachment and the embrace of impermanence, these tools are not just theories. They are the keys to true freedom, to peace of mind, and to spiritual awakening. But here's the truth. This is only the beginning. There is so much more depth to explore within these practices. And the best part? You have the power to apply these teachings in your life right now. The shift in how you perceive your thoughts, your emotions, and your relationships can be the catalyst for a life filled with clarity, peace, and liberation from the cycles of suffering. If you found value in the wisdom shared today, don't let it end here. Subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into practical Buddhist teachings that can change your life. Like this video if you felt the spark of insight, and share it with anyone who needs to hear this message. I want to hear from you. What thoughts or attachments have you struggled with? What part of today's teachings resonated most deeply with you? Leave your comments below. Let's start a conversation and continue growing together. And remember, this video contains so many transformative lessons that can truly change the way you live. Watch till the end to capture every single piece of this invaluable wisdom. The path to liberation is waiting for you. Will you take the next step?